Trump reveals why America fears the truth of its own history. Why does America tremble before the mirror of its own past? Why does even the faintest whisper of truth send tremors through the pillars of a nation that so proudly proclaims its faith in freedom, honor, and justice? Donald Trump, never one to bow before convention, never afraid to voice what others bury, presses his hand against the fragile glass of history and demands that America gaze into it. Not at the myth, not at the polished tale recited in classrooms or celebrated in glossy parades of patriotic ritual. No, he insists that the nation confront the raw and unvarnished image of its own soul. Beneath the textbooks and slogans, beneath the bronze statues and hymns sung in stadiums, there lies something unsettled, something buried. It is a history not crafted to illuminate but to obscure, not written to liberate but to govern the imagination. Draped in the language of virtue, it conceals a body riddled with contradictions. And here lies Trump's charge. America fears the truth not because it is fragile, but because it is too powerful, because it has the strength to shatter illusions. The elites, the self-appointed guardians of culture and power, understand this. They know that truth is not docile but fierce. It does not soothe, it unsettles. Truth is a hammer, not a lullaby. It does not whisper, it thunders. It does not comfort, it convicts. This is why, to Trump declares, they have caged it, softened it, repackaged it into forms palatable enough to protect the myth. For if the truth were ever released in its raw force, it would undo the very architecture of America's self-image. In his vision, the nation is not merely reluctant to face its truth, it is terrified of what that truth would reveal about its own reflection. And so, as we walk together through this revelation, I invite you to reflect deeply on these questions. If this resonates with you, if you too feel the weight of these words, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments, because conversations like this are not just dialogue, they are the beginning of awakening. Trump drops a bombshell. America's history was never what you were taught. Every American child grows up with this story. It is a story of pilgrims seeking liberty, of founding fathers signing sacred parchment under candlelight, of brave soldiers, defending freedom, of pioneers taming the wilderness, of a land blessed by providence. It is a story of struggle, yes, but always redeemed by triumph. It is a story that insists America is not merely a nation, it is an idea, a beacon to the world, a city upon a hill. But Trump, with his usual defiance of convention, rips through the gilded fabric of this tale. He declares that America's history, as it has been taught, is not history at all. It is theater. It is not the unfiltered record of the past. It is a curated performance designed to uphold power. You have been told a story, he seems to say, but not the story. You have been given a portrait, but painted only in flattering light. The bombshell he drops is not just that mistakes were made. Every nation admits to errors in its past. His claim is more radical, that the very narrative of America has been manipulated from the start. To him, the official history is not about preserving truth, but about preserving control. By deciding what to highlight and what to omit, the architects of the national story have built a myth that serves their interests. Think of it, the noble revolution that spoke of liberty but turned a blind eye to slavery. The Constitution that proclaimed rights universal, yet denied them to millions. The March of Progress that trampled over indigenous nations. These are not incidental contradictions, they are foundational ones. Yet in the official version, they are softened, footnoted, or excused. Trump's provocation is not that these facts are unknown, but that they have been domesticated, made harmless, when in reality, they should unsettle every conscience. And what happens when generations are fed this curated history? They come to believe in a sanitized America that never truly existed. They pledge allegiance not to a reality, but to an image. They defend not their history, but their myth. And Trump, in his raw way, says, the myth is the prison. The story that meant to unite Americans has, in truth, blinded them. Consider his rhetorical weapon of choice, bluntness. Where others might speak in academic caution, Trump bursts in with declarations that shock and offend. But this is part of the strategy. He seeks to jolt Americans awake, to force them to see that what they were taught was less an education than an indoctrination. He is not polishing history for the sake of balance. He is tearing at it, exposing it, dragging it into the harsh light of day. And this is where the fear lies. For if America's history was never what you were taught, then what else might be false? If the foundation of the narrative is shaky, does the house still stand? If the fathers of the nation were not demigods but flawed men protecting their own power, then what becomes of the sacred documents they wrote? If freedom itself was compromised from the beginning, can it still be claimed as the nation's eternal gift? These questions are not academic, they are existential. They cut to the very identity of America. Trump's revelation strikes like thunder. The past you believed in was a stage play. The actors wore costumes of virtue, but the script was written by those who sought to control the audience. And America, ever eager for a story of its own greatness, applauded without asking what had been left off stage. This, Trump declares, is the betrayal. Not that the nation erred, for all nations err, but that it lied about its errors, concealed its contradictions, and punished those who dared to reveal them. The betrayal is not in the sin, but in the silence. And it is this silence that he claims to break. For America hearing this, the instinct is outrage. To question the story is to question the very self. That is why Trump's words ignite fury. He does not simply argue against policies or opponents. He pierces the mythology of the nation itself. And when mythology is pierced, identity feels threatened. America does not merely fear history, it fears the loss of the mirror. It has always used to see itself as righteous, chosen, exceptional. But Trump insists, if the mirror is a lie, it is better shattered. Better to see the face scarred with truth than to live forever in the reflection of a myth. And so he drops the bombshell, unrelenting, daring the nation to look at its history not as it wishes it to be remembered, but as it was. In doing so, he transforms history from a bedtime story into a reckoning. The truth they want buried, why America fears its own reflection. There is a reason people fear mirrors in the dark. A mirror does not invent, it reveals. It reflects not only what stands before it, but what hides within. America, Trump argues, has avoided its own reflection for centuries. It prefers portraits, oil-painted and carefully staged, over the raw surface of truth. For truth, unpolished and merciless, reflects not the dream of America, but the contradictions that haunt it. Trump frames the struggle not as one of left versus right, red versus blue, conservative versus progressive. No, the deeper struggle it is between myth and memory, between those who build monuments to illusion and those who insist on tearing the veil away. And the elites, he says, are terrified of the latter. They know that if America stares into its own reflection, it will see not only its triumphs, but its betrayals, not only its victories, but its crimes. Why then is truth buried? Because truth does not serve the powerful. A nation can endure mistakes, scandals, even wars. But can it endure the loss of its story? For nations, like individuals, are sustained not by facts, but by meaning. And meaning is fragile. The American story has always been its sacred flame, the idea that despite flaws, it represents freedom itself. If this flame is extinguished, what remains? What anchors the flag? What binds the people? Trump insists that those in power fear not chaos in the streets, but chaos in the mind. They fear what happens when ordinary Americans awaken to the reality that their reflection has been distorted. When citizens realize they have been handed not history but propaganda, trust collapses. The institutions lose legitimacy. The so-called guardians of democracy are unmasked as curators of illusion. Think of the textbooks, those neat little volumes distributed to every school child, reciting tales of noble founders, selfless presidents, and benevolent progress. Trump suggests they are less books than scripts, rehearsals for loyalty. Think of the monuments in marble and bronze, erected not to remind but to reassure. Think of the national holidays, rituals designed to sanctify memory while obscuring reality. These are not harmless symbols, he argues. They are deliberate constructions meant to control how Americans see themselves. And why must the reflection be avoided? Because America's truth is uncomfortable. To face it is to admit that freedom was purchased by bondage, that wealth was built on the broken backs of the exploited, that expansion meant extermination, that progress too often wore the mask of plunder. These truths are not mere footnotes. They are foundations. They do not decorate the American house. They are the beams that hold it up. Trump knows this is the kind of talk that ignites fury, yet he thrives on fury because fury signals that the wound has been touched. His strategy is not to soothe but to expose. He forces the mirror before the nation, saying, look at yourself. See what you have become by hiding what you were. The fear of reflection is not unique to America. It is human, but when a nation claims to be the light of the world, the fear becomes dangerous. For the greater the claim, the darker the shadow. America, in Trump's telling, fears its history because it reveals the gap between its ideals and its actions. It reveals hypocrisy not as an accident, but as a pattern. And once the pattern is seen, the myth collapses. This collapse is what the establishment dreads. For if the myth dies, what remains to unite the people? The elites worry that a nation stripped of its story will fragment. Better, they believe, to preserve the illusion than to risk the chaos of truth. Better to bury the reflection than to confront it. But Trump turns this logic upside down. He insists that only by facing the reflection can America survive. To bury the truth is not to protect the nation, but to corrode it from within. A house built on denial cannot stand. A people bound by illusion cannot endure. If America is to continue, it must look in the mirror, however painful that reflection may be. There is something almost biblical in the way Trump frames it. He presents truth as a judgment day, a moment when all is revealed and no excuse can soften the verdict. America stands before its own reflection as before a divine tribunal. The question is not whether it will be found flawless, but whether it has the courage to admit its flaws. For courage, he insists, is not the absence of guilt. It is the willingness to confront it. In this sense, Trump's message is less about history than about identity. He is not an academic tallying footnotes in dusty archives. He is a provocateur, tearing the mask away and demanding, who are you really? Who have you been? And who do you claim to be? The elites want these questions buried because they destabilize the narrative that grants them authority. If Americans begin to question the story, they will begin to question the storytellers. Thus, the burial of truth is not accidental. It is intentional. It is an act of power. For to control history is to control identity, and to control identity is to control destiny. America does not merely fear its reflection. It has been taught to fear it. The burial of truth has been institutionalized, normalized, wrapped in patriotic language. And Trump, by ripping the lid off, threatens the entire order. This is why the reaction to his words is so fierce. It is not simply about him, it is about what he represents. He is a disruptor of myth, a disturber of sleep, a man who forces a nation to wake from its dream. Whether one loves him or hates him, the effect is undeniable. He compels America to look at the reflection it has avoided for generations. And what happens when the reflection is finally seen? There are only two choices. Either America denies it, smashing the mirror to preserve the myth, or it embraces it, however painful, and begins the long work of reconciling who it is with who it claims to be. Trump's bombshell is not merely historical, it is existential. He asks America to choose between illusion and truth, between comfort and courage, between the burial of the past and the resurrection of reality. Trump exposes the ultimate lie. Freedom was never free. Freedom, America's most sacred word. Whispered in classrooms, shouted in campaigns, carved into monuments, sung in anthems. It is the beating heart of the American identity, the one claim the nation raises above all others. We are the land of the free. From the revolution to the present day, freedom has been treated not merely as a political condition, but as a birthright, a divine inheritance, a gift secured once and forever. But Trump, with the bluntness that defines his rhetoric, takes aim at this sacred creed. He declares that the idea of freedom, as Americans have been taught to understand it, is not the whole truth. It is the ultimate lie. Freedom, he insists, was never free. And more than that, it was never pure. It has always carried a price tag, and that price has always been paid by someone else. Think of the irony. At the very moment the Declaration of Independence proclaimed that all men are created equal, the institution of slavery thrived. The same parchment that declared liberty as inalienable coexisted with chains, whips, and auction blocks. Trump's provocation is to say what many know but few dare to confront. Freedom in America was born alongside bondage. It did not emerge from a vacuum of justice, but from a world where liberty for some was purchased by the suffering of others. This is the truth America fears to acknowledge. For to admit it is to admit that freedom has never been universal, that it has always been rationed, portioned out in ways that preserve power. The mythology insists that freedom was a gift handed to all, defended by blood and sacrifice, sanctified by history. But the reality, Trump suggests, is darker. Freedom has always been selective. Some received it as inheritance. Others fought for centuries to taste even a fraction of it. Freedom was never free. The phrase in Trump's framing is not merely about soldiers dying on battlefields. It is about the hidden costs buried beneath the rhetoric. It is about the enslaved whose labor built the wealth that allowed others to proclaim liberty. It is about the indigenous nations whose displacement made room for settlers to speak of opportunity. It is about workers in factories and mines whose sweat and broken bodies made prosperity possible for the few. It is about immigrants drawn by promises of liberty, only to find themselves bound by economic chains. America, he insists, does not like to admit this. For if freedom carries such a cost, then the narrative of divine blessing begins to unravel. The shining city on a hill becomes less a beacon and more a fortress, its walls built from the suffering of those excluded. The myth of freedom as a universal right collapses into the reality of freedom as a privilege, too often distributed by those in power and withheld from those without it. Trump's style is to strip away the delicate phrases and cut directly to the contradiction. He does not cloak it in scholarly nuance. He hurls it like a stone through glass. He forces Americans to hear the words without cushioning. The freedom you celebrate has always been purchased, and not always by you. It has been subsidized by those who never got to share in it. This is why he calls it the ultimate lie. Because if the story of America rests on freedom, and that freedom has been distorted from the beginning, then the entire edifice trembles. The lie is not that freedom does not exist, it does. The lie is that freedom was ever pure, untainted, or equally shared. By insisting otherwise, America has created generations of citizens who believe in a dream but live in a contradiction. And here lies the philosophical weight of his claim. Freedom in Trump's telling is not an eternal possession, but a battlefield. It is never secure, never final, never fully given. It is fought for, defended, stolen, reclaimed, and fought for again. To claim it as a completed gift is to betray its very nature. Freedom is fragile, not guaranteed. It is the most precious of human conditions precisely because it can be lost. This is why America fears this truth, because it demands responsibility. If freedom was never free, then Americans cannot simply inherit it. They must earn it, protect it, confront the injustices that undermine it. They must admit that their liberty is bound up with the suffering of others, past and present. To face this is uncomfortable, even unbearable. It means freedom is not just a banner waved in celebration, it is a moral burden. Trump thrives on this discomfort. He thrives on exposing what people would rather leave unsaid. And in doing so, he transforms freedom from a comfortable word into a haunting one. He makes Americans ask, who paid for my liberty? Whose voices were silenced so mine could speak? Whose labor built the wealth I enjoy? Whose suffering was ignored while I recited the Pledge of Allegiance? This is not an attack on freedom itself. It is a demand to recognize its cost. To ignore that cost is to live in illusion. To acknowledge it is to live in reality. And reality, Trump insists, is the only foundation strong enough to build upon. A nation that denies the cost of its freedom builds its future on sand. A nation that acknowledges it may, at last, begin to reconcile its ideals with its actions. In this way, Trump's words cut deeper than politics. They strike at the soul of American identity. For if freedom was never free, then what does it mean to be American? Is it to inherit a myth or to confront a truth? Is it to bask in the glow of patriotic stories or to accept the weight of history's shadow? Trump challenges Americans to stop seeing freedom as a birthright, automatically guaranteed, and start seeing it as a responsibility that must be constantly earned and shared. And so the ultimate lie is exposed. Freedom was never the simple, universal gift it was claimed to be. It has always been contested, costly, scarred. To face this is painful. To deny it is dangerous. And Trump, with his characteristic audacity, forces the nation to stand at this crossroads, continue in the comfort of illusion, or confront the price of liberty and, perhaps for the first time, begin to make it real for all. Why Trump says only the brave can handle America's real story. There comes a moment in every life when illusions no longer suffice. A man may live in denial for years, even decades, but one day the truth knocks, relentless, demanding to be acknowledged. Trump insists that America now stands at such a threshold. The illusions of its history, polished, comforting, reassuring, can no longer conceal the fractures beneath. The question he poses is stark. Who has the courage to face it? For courage, in Trump's view, is not the valor of battlefields or the applause of parades. It is the willingness to confront reality when reality wounds the soul. True bravery is not found in shouting slogans or saluting flags, but in daring to strip away myth and stare into the mirror of history. And this, he says, is where America falters. Many proclaim love of country, but few are willing to love it enough to face its flaws. Why only the brave? Because truth is heavy. It is not a feather one wears lightly. It is a stone that presses against the chest. To admit that the nation's past is riddled with contradictions is to endure the pain of betrayal. It is to feel the sting of hypocrisy, the sorrow of injustice, the shame of silences. Weak hearts cannot bear this. They prefer the comfort of myth, the sweetness of denial. They prefer to believe that America's story is one of steady progress, noble sacrifice, and unblemished virtue. But Trump, always the disruptor, refuses to offer comfort. He thrusts the mirror forward and demands that America look. Look at the chains behind the flag. Look at the broken treaties beneath the Constitution. Look at the sweatshops behind prosperity, the silenced voices behind liberty. Look at the truth, raw and unpolished, and ask yourself, are you strong enough to see it? This is why he speaks of bravery, not intellect, not ideology, not even patriotism, but bravery. For to be brave is to endure disillusionment. To be brave is to let the myths crumble in your hands and still find a way to love the nation that emerges from the rubble. Cowards cling to illusion because illusion is easy. Heroes accept truth because truth, though painful, is the only path to redemption. America, he suggests, has mistaken pride for courage. It believes that celebrating its greatness makes it strong. But true strength does not come from celebration. It comes from confrontation. A nation that only praises itself becomes fragile, brittle, easily shattered when challenged. But a nation that faces its sins, confesses them, and still presses forward, such a nation cannot be broken. Trump, in his characteristic style, does not wrap this in gentle tones. He makes it sound like a dare, even a provocation. Do you have the guts to face who you really are? Or will you keep hiding behind fairy tales? He knows this language enrages some and inspires others, but rage itself proves the point. People rage when they are touched in the place of vulnerability. And what could be more vulnerable than the story a nation tells about itself? The brave, he insists, are those who can endure the discomfort of paradox. They can admit that America is both great and guilty, both noble and flawed, both beacon and betrayer. They can live with the tension that the same nation that proclaimed liberty also practiced slavery, that the same Constitution that enshrined rights also denied them. The coward wants purity, either all good or all evil. The brave accept complexity. The story is stained, and yet it is ours. And here lies the deeper philosophy beneath Trump's provocation. He suggests that love of country is not proven by blind praise but by honest reckoning. True patriots do not cling to illusion. They embrace reality because only reality can be redeemed. To love America is not to pretend it is flawless. It is to love it enough to demand truth. Only the brave can do this because only the brave can love what is real. Trump presents history then as a trial. The jury is not made of scholars or politicians. It is the American people themselves. And the verdict will depend not on what happened in the past, but on whether the nation has the courage to face it. Will it continue to bury its truth, to decorate its myths, to silence its contradictions? Or will it, at last, confess, repent, and begin the work of becoming what it claims to be? In this sense, bravery is not only individual, but collective. A single person can face their own reflection, but can a nation face its own? Can millions together admit the cost of their freedom, the weight of their sins, the depth of their contradictions? It is easier to fight foreign enemies than to confront one's own reflection. Yet Trump insists this is the battle that matters most. And so he ends where he began, with truth. Not the polished truth of speeches, not the managed truth of textbooks, not the convenient truth of politicians. The raw truth, the kind that cuts and heals at once. America fears it, he says, because it knows the truth will demand change. It will demand humility, sacrifice, responsibility. It will demand that the myth deek so that the nation may live. Only the brave can endure such a demand. Only the brave can look in the mirror and not turn away. Only the brave can carry the weight of history without being crushed by it. And so Trump's challenge resounds, echoing like thunder. If you call yourself American, prove it. Not by waving the flag, not by chanting slogans, but by facing the truth of your own history. For only then can the nation hope to be not merely powerful, but honest, not merely proud, but free. This is why America fears the truth of its history, not because truth is weak, but because it is strong enough to shatter illusions. And this is why Trump says, only the brave can handle it.